Today is another big day at the World Economic Forum for all these green energy loving elites from around the world, and that includes Greta Thunberg, who we call Our Lady of Davos. She returned today to lecture everyone about how things should be. And today's comments at Davos come after she was seen cosplaying with some German police, smiling while she was being arrested and carried away. She was protesting coal mining in Germany. Now, a lot of green activists are mad because Germany is now desperate for energy, so they have to do things like mine for coal. After years of pursuing progressive energy policies domestically while also relying on Russia for their fossil fuel supply, they are now having to backtrack and fall to coal. It was just a couple of years ago where the Germans were laughing at the UN when Donald Trump warned everyone that this European energy crisis would eventually come someday. Now, sometime later, we saw Greta Thunberg also in the media stage this stare down with President Trump. Now, Germany is also now trying to backtrack on their plans to unplug from nuclear power after canceling plans to have more nuclear energy. So Greta Thunberg's claims about greed and short-term economic profits, about putting people above the planet, is actually the opposite of what's true. The Germans and a lot of other working class people right now are suffering in the short term because too many of the people at Davos are focusing on political profit and notoriety. Now, the folks at the World Economic Forum are trying to make sure that whatever happens with the green energy sector, they'll benefit long before any of the rest of us do, and that includes Greta Thunberg. Now, we also got to talk about Al Gore. He went on a rant at the World Economic Forum claiming that the oceans were boiling. And he was quite mad about the whole thing, too. Take a look.
That's what's boiling the oceans, creating these atmospheric rivers and the rain bombs and sucking the moisture out of the land and creating the droughts and melting the ice and raising the sea level and causing these waves of climate refugees predicted to reach 1 billion in this century. Look at the xenophobia and political authoritarian trends that have come from just a few million.
Of course, you got to get the xenophobia in there. Let's welcome in now Dave Rubin, host of the Rubin Report and author of Don't Burn This Country. You know, Dave, it wouldn't be an Al Gore rant about climate change unless you were able to fold in xenophobia somehow.
Al Gore, who sold his cable channel, his failing cable channel after he was vice president, that he only got because he had access to the cable networks as VP. Current TV, it was called. He sold it for $500 million, even though no one was watching it, to the government of Qatar so that it could become Al Jazeera America. Ironically, Qatar is the #2 exporter of oil, fossil fuels, all over the world. It's quite bizarre, and I will not be lectured by Al Gore or that man that I think was wearing an Al Gore costume, because what in the world happened to Al Gore? Jeez.
I would imagine there was, you know, not just carbon being emitted from his mouth at the time, but a lot of spittle, too, because he was really angry. And we didn't have time for the John Kerry soundbite, but you saw it. Everyone saw it. Money, money, money. And this group of, you know, special people or a special select class who are here to tell you what to do. And what about Greta Thunberg's arrest this week? I'm sure you probably enjoyed that as well.
Absolutely incredible. I'm sure you guys have the other video on this. I mean, the entire thing was staged. Moments before this, what you're showing right now, there is video of her literally standing there smiling, taking pictures with those officers as they're about to arrest her. It's all theater. This entire thing is theater. I am a little nervous to say anything negative about Greta Thunberg because I don't want Interpol busting into my house and arresting me because she's queen of the known universe. But this World Economic Forum thing and this idea that nations should not be sovereign and that we send these clown-like people like Al Gore and John Kerry over there to tell us how we should live here when we've decided we don't want people like John Kerry and Al Gore as president. Both of them are failed presidential candidates. It's rather extraordinary. You know, no one goes to these meetings in Davos or wherever else they do it, up in the hills in the middle of nowhere, and ever talks about the sovereignty of nations, ever talks about the rights of the individual. They talk about how they can control us. And John, I don't like it very much.
And I think the American people have spoken, too, on Brian Stelter. They don't want to hear anything from him either, but somehow he winds up at WEF. I actually thought this was pretty appropriate, pretty on brand for WEF to have Brian Stelter leading a discussion about mis and disinformation. And take a listen to what one European official said during this conversation about free speech.
We need the people who understand the language and the case law in the country. Because what qualifies as hate speech, as illegal hate speech, which you will have soon also in the US. I think that we have a strong reason why we have this in the criminal law.
So, this is a European official talking about the need to criminalize speech. The Europeans really just don't understand the First Amendment, do they?
John, I can't repeat what I said on my show about her on your show because you're a reputable news program and I would be accused of hate speech. So I think people can probably garner what I was thinking about that woman. The idea that the United States is going to have hate speech laws is absolutely absurd. The Supreme Court has already decided this. We have the First Amendment, and it's backed up by that Second Amendment. I know they don't like that one either. But real quick on Stelter, you really need to understand this, people watching. Stelter was the biggest agent of misinformation on CNN, which is why he got fired in the first place. He was hosting a show called Reliable Sources, which, as I often said, if they would have just called it Unreliable Sources, then it would have all been okay, because everything that they peddled on that show, from Russia collusion, very fine people on both sides, Brett Kavanaugh's a serial rapist, Kyle Rittenhouse is a white supremacist, Jussie Smollett hoax, the whole
Did you say Michael
thing.
Avenatti is going to be president someday? Did we get that one in there?
Oh yeah, Michael Avenatti's the greatest man on earth. He lied about absolutely everything. Finally, the guy gets fired by CNN, rather extraordinary. And then what happens? He becomes a professor at Harvard, and now he's speaking at the WEF. These people fail up because the more that they just give to the nonsensical system designed to control us, the more the system rewards us. I'd rather
it's so true.
be hanging out with you, Johnny.
It's so true. All right, let's celebrate Pride Month, because it's Pride Month 12 months out of the year, including in the NFL. But we got to talk about this Russian hockey player. His name is Igor Pavarov. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. He said he didn't want to participate because he's Russian Orthodox. It goes against his religious beliefs. And here's what he said about it.
I think you fine the Flyers $1 million for this. I'm not kidding. Figure this out and stop offending people on nights where it's not about that. It's supposed to be about inclusivity. The National Hockey League need to attack this and figure this out. Because what I heard last night was offensive and didn't make any sense.
Okay, he was just responding to what Pavarov said and to also what the Flyers head coach said about Pavarov being true to himself and adhering to his own moral beliefs. This guy said that the NHL should fine the Flyers $1 million. And it looks like the NHL, maybe the Flyers are starting to come back on this a little bit. But when you criminalize speech in a country like Canada, which it's, I think in some places, illegal to misgender somebody, I wonder if this guy who works for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's all state-owned up there, if he's just like playing up to his overlords in the Canadian media.
Yes. That's exactly what this guy's doing. I don't know much about this guy, but it's completely ridiculous. And the player does not have to do anything that goes against his own ethics. He didn't say he wasn't going to play in the game. He didn't want to basically wear the pin. John, I know I can drop a Seinfeld reference with you on this. I will not wear the ribbon, right? That was the episode of Seinfeld where Kramer goes to the AIDS march. He's there. He's doing all this stuff. He just doesn't want to wear the ribbon, and everyone tries to take him out because of it. Of course he's allowed to decide what his own moral code is. He's not out. And by the way, in the talk that he gave when he was explaining his reasoning for not wanting to wear the ribbon or whatever it was, he basically says, look, I respect everybody, but in essence, I don't have to bow down to your politically correct motives. And that is completely right. It is your certain right as an American, and should be your right as a Canadian, although it's a little screwy up there.
Should be.
Yeah, and yes, they should fire, or they should fine the Phillies Flyers. I'm not a hockey guy. They should fine them $1 million. It's all so stupid.
It is. And well, he was also just incensed that the Tampa Bay Rays players who did the same thing last season wanted to sit out, Pride Night. They didn't believe in that event. He wanted to see them criminally prosecuted. It's really beyond the pale sometimes. But Dave?
John, there's nothing like bludgeoning people in the name of tolerance, right? If you really beat them senseless with a tolerance bat, they'll really come around on your tolerance. I read that somewhere. Yes,
the beatings will continue until the tolerance improves, so they say. And of course, one Seinfeld reference, we got to get at least one in there. Nice work, Dave Rubin, as always. Thanks.
Good to see you, John.
Hey guys, it's Rob Carson. Your retirement funds are being threatened with even more losses from record inflation, recession, and skyrocketing interest rates. Fortunately, the highly trained specialists at American Hartford Gold can show you how to protect your savings and retirement accounts by diversifying your portfolio with physical gold and silver. If you call them right now as a special offer, they will give you a free gold coin on your first qualifying order, so don't wait. Call 866-935-4309. That's 866-935-4309 or text Newsmax to 65532. That's Newsmax to 65532.